Bryan Kohberger was a PhD student in criminology. He studied how investigators catch criminals. He knew about DNA evidence. He knew about cell phone tracking. He knew about genetic genealogy, the technique used to identify the Golden State Killer. In November 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death in their off-campus house in Moscow, Idaho. The investigation that followed used every technique Kohberger had studied. He was identified in 6 weeks. Here is exactly how they found him. At 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, the night of November 13, 2022, ended in silence no one could have imagined. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, 4 students all in their early 20s, were found dead in the house they shared just off the University of Idaho campus. 2 others, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funka, survived. The house was a familiar place for friends and roommates, but that night, it became the center of an unthinkable loss. Police were not called until 4:10 in the morning. By then, the scene inside was already beyond help. In the hours before, Mortensen later told investigators she heard strange noises, a thump, a scream. She opened her bedroom door and saw a man in black clothing and a mask, his face mostly hidden except for what she described as bushy eyebrows. Frozen in fear, she closed her door and waited. The call to police came only after the surviving roommates found their friends and realized the horror of what had happened. That house, with its rooms, its stairways, its ordinary college clutter, became the last known location for 4 lives. Before any suspect, before any forensic evidence, there was just the record of who was present, who survived, and what was left behind. A tan leather knife sheath lay on the bedroom floor, close to Madison Mogen. Its presence was not subtle. A Ka Bar brand, military-style sheath stamped with the United States Marine Corps insignia. Investigators collected it within hours, sealing it in an evidence bag and logging every transfer. The sheath would become the physical anchor of the entire case. Forensic analysis at the Idaho State Police Lab focused on the button snap. There, a trace of skin cells, touch DNA, yielded a single-source male profile. The lab confirmed it. Not a mixture, not a partial, but a clear genetic fingerprint. The odds of a random match were described as astronomically low, though the exact figure remained sealed in court records. This single-source male DNA became the centerpiece of the prosecution's argument, a link that would later stand up to both scientific scrutiny and defense challenge. While the sheath was being processed, another lead surfaced. Security cameras in the King Road neighborhood captured a white 2015 Hyundai Elantra making repeated passes through the area between 3:30 and 4:20 in the morning. The car circled the block, slowed near the house, and left just before police were called. The make and model were clear enough for investigators to broadcast a nationwide alert. No license plate was visible, but the pattern was unmistakable. A vehicle returning again and again during the window when the murders occurred. With the sheath and the car, the investigation shifted. A single piece of leather, carrying a man's DNA, and a white sedan caught on camera were the first threads that turned a scene of loss into a solvable case. Each would soon point toward a name investigators had not yet spoken. Standard DNA testing looked for a match in the National CODIS database, but the profile from the knife sheath did not correspond to anyone already in the system. With no direct hit, investigators needed a new approach. The Idaho State Police sent the sheath to Othram, a lab specializing in advanced forensic genetics. Othram generated a high-resolution SNP profile, a far more detailed genetic map than the typical short tandem repeat test. This kind of profile is what powers modern investigative genetic genealogy. Investigators uploaded the SNP data to GEDmatch and MyHeritage, 2 genealogy websites where people upload their own DNA to find relatives. These platforms allow law enforcement access under certain conditions, with the consent of users. The strategy was not new. In 2018, the Golden State Killer case had shown how building out family trees from distant relatives could lead to an unknown suspect. In the Idaho case, genealogists mapped out lines of descent, cross-referencing public records with the DNA matches. Each step narrowed the focus, moving from distant cousins to closer relatives until the pool shrank to a single family. On December 19, 2022, Bryan Kohberger became the only viable suspect. He lived in Pennsylvania, far from the crime scene, but his family line fit the genetic markers. To confirm the lead, investigators collected trash from outside the Kohberger home on December 27th. A used napkin yielded DNA from Kohberger's father. The lab reported a 99.9998% probability that the DNA on the sheath came from his biological son. 3 days later, on December 30th, Bryan Kohberger was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The forensic trail, built from a single touch of skin, had led directly to his door. Cell tower records showed Bryan Kohberger's phone near 1122 King Road at least a dozen times in the months before the murders. These pings were not random. The device registered in the immediate area, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the early morning, always close enough to place the phone within a few hundred yards of the house. On the night of November 13th, the pattern changed. Kohberger's phone was switched off or set to airplane mode just before the period when the killings occurred. It cut off its signal at the most critical window. The device came back online around 2:45 a.m., pinging a tower as it moved southwest, away from Moscow. Investigators later traced this route and matched it to the path of the white Hyundai Elantra seen on neighborhood cameras. Digital forensics uncovered more. In September 2022, Kohberger ordered a Ka-bar fixed blade knife with a leather sheath from Amazon, shipped to his Pennsylvania address. Search history on his phone included the phrase, "sociopathic traits in college student." There were searches for pornography using the keywords drugged and sleeping. On the morning of the murders, at 10:31 a.m., a selfie appeared in his photo library. The image showed Kohberger's face, the thick eyebrows later described by a surviving roommate. The timestamp placed him still in Idaho, only hours after 4 students were found dead. Bryan Kohberger was not an outsider to the world of criminal investigation. As a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, he spent his days in academic buildings just 10 miles from the University of Idaho. He worked as a teaching assistant, grading papers, and leading discussions on topics that included forensic DNA evidence, cell tower analysis, and investigative genetic genealogy, the very methods that would later become central to the case against him. Department records show he gave a presentation on advanced crime scene investigation techniques in the spring of 2022. His coursework and research placed him at the cutting edge of forensic science. Yet, the digital record revealed a different kind of proximity. In the weeks before the murders, Kohberger followed 3 of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, and Xana Kernodle, on Instagram. He sent multiple direct messages to Madison Mogen in late October 2022. The messages went unanswered. Investigators later recovered deleted records of these attempts at contact through a subpoena to the platform. The contradiction is plain. A scholar of criminal justice trained to understand how suspects are caught left behind a trail of physical and digital evidence that would lead investigators straight to him. The gap between what he studied and what he left behind remains one of the most striking features of the case. On July 2, 2025, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. The plea agreement removed the death penalty from the table. 3 weeks later, Judge Stephen Hippler sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms without parole, plus 10 years for burglary, and an order to pay $290,000 in restitution. In the packed courtroom, the families of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin addressed Kohberger directly. Steve Goncalves stood and said, "Today we're here to finish what you started." When the judge offered Kohberger a chance to speak, he replied, "I respectfully decline." The hearing closed with a sense of finality, but not resolution. Outside, forensic consultant Brent Turvey questioned the chain of custody for the knife sheath, igniting debate about the evidence. In 2026, former FBI agent Christopher Whitcomb published a book that renewed arguments over the defense strategy and the reliability of the forensic record. The court's acceptance of the plea agreement closed the door on any future appeal. With sentencing complete, the legal case is finished, but the public record keeps growing. Documents once sealed by court order are now being released in stages, their contents heavily redacted, leaving large portions unreadable. Even as the file expands, the central question remains unanswered. The motive was never officially established. No statement, no explanation, no clear reason in the record. Judge Stephen Hippler addressed this directly at sentencing, saying, "The motive may never be known. The case stands resolved by law, but not by understanding." 4 consecutive life sentences, no parole, no appeal. The motive was never established. The judge said so at sentencing. Kohberger said nothing. New documents are still being unsealed. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin. Last known location, 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho, November 13, 2022.